Get interviewed at the half for 5 points. I'm serious. It's a playoff game, and don't get me wrong, like, seriously. Rui started the game, Rob G, 6 for 6, 16 points, and they interviewed Bronny at the half. Why? Rob G, why? He had 5 points. Come on, man. This is what I'm saying.
ESPN had no business interviewing Bronny James at halftime of a playoff game after he scored only 5 points, and that is why Rob Parker went off the way he did. That is the main point. This was not some huge takeover game. This was not a moment where Bronny had 18 points in the first half and shocked the world. This was not a case where he was clearly the biggest story on the floor because of his level of play. He had 5 points, 5, in a playoff game. And while that may be a cool moment for him on a personal level, it does not make it the right basketball move for a major network to stop everything and act like the whole game was about him. That is what made so many people roll their eyes. That is what made Rob Parker lose his patience. Because to a lot of basketball fans, this felt like one more example of the media forcing a story that does not match what is actually happening in the game. The part that makes this even worse is that there were other players on the floor doing much more and getting much less attention. Rui Hachimura had a strong half. LeBron was playing well. Other guys were making real impact plays. If you are going to do a halftime interview in the middle of a playoff game, the normal idea is simple. You talk to the player who is having the best game, or at least one of the players who is clearly shaping the result. That is how sports coverage is supposed to work. It is supposed to follow the game. It is supposed to reward performance. It is supposed to make the basketball itself the center of attention. But when Bronny gets that interview after 5 points, the message becomes very clear. This is not really about who is playing the best. This is about who can create the most noise, the most clicks, the most reactions, and the most talk online. That is why Rob Parker sounded so angry. He was not just mad about one interview. He was reacting to the bigger issue behind it. He was reacting to the feeling that basketball is getting pushed to the side so that media companies can sell storylines. And once fans feel that happening over and over again, they start getting tired of it. They start feeling like the game is not being covered honestly anymore. They start feeling like certain players are protected, certain names are pushed, and everybody else is treated like they are in the background of somebody else's movie. That is exactly how this Bronny situation feels to a lot of people. It feels forced. It feels planned. It feels like the coverage already decided what the story was going to be before the game even started. Now, let's be fair about one thing. Bronny making playoff history with his father is a real story. A father-son moment in the NBA playoffs is something people will remember. There is no question about that. It is rare. It is different. It is something the league can put in a video package and celebrate. Nobody is saying it has no value at all. But there is...
Like, oh, go ahead, Bronny. I see you, young man. So I think people are just happy to see somebody that seems to have been a good kid, someone who has seems to have been
That's not what this is about.
This.
I'm so tired of hearing that. There's a ton of good kids who can't play. Stop with that. He's a good kid. There's a ton. There's a lot of guys who led their school.
And nobody said there has to be a limit. Nobody said there had to be a limit on good kids.
He's a good kid, as if that means that you should be on the basketball team if you're a good kid. You know how many kids were good kids who got caught? Because they couldn't play.
There's a big difference between saying it is a nice moment and pretending it should be the main thing everybody talks about in the middle of a playoff battle. That is where the issue starts. Because once you go from this is a cool moment to let's stop and interview him at halftime even though he has only 5 points, you are no longer just covering history. You are pushing hype. You are turning a small moment into a giant event because of the last name on the back of the jersey. And that is the heart of this whole debate. If Bronny James was not LeBron James's son, would ESPN have interviewed him at halftime for 5 points? Everybody already knows the answer. No chance. It would not even be discussed. If another young player came off the bench, hit 1-3, got a lob, and had 5 points, the cameras would keep moving. The network would be talking about the stars, the score, the game plan, the comeback, the mistakes, the pressure, and the playoff stakes. That is what makes this stand out so much. People do not hate the fact that Bronny got attention. People hate the fact that he got special treatment. And when that special treatment is this obvious, it becomes impossible to ignore. This is why the reaction online was so split. Some people said Rob Parker was hating. Some said he was bitter. Some said the father-son history made the interview worth it. But a lot of other people looked at the same thing and said, no, this is exactly what is wrong with sports media right now, because sports media is supposed to show us the game, not tell us what story we are supposed to care about. It is supposed to let great play earn the spotlight. But what fans keep seeing now is that spotlight being handed out based on fame, family ties, and internet power. That is why so many people are frustrated. Not because Bronny had a good moment, but because the coverage treated him like he had taken over the game when he clearly had not. Bronny is in a strange spot because he is not just seen as a player. He is seen as a symbol, a brand, and a media event. That is the truth. Every time he steps on the floor, the discussion gets bigger than his game. People are not only watching his shot, his defense, or his passing, they are watching what he means for LeBron, what he means for the league, what he means for the future, and what he means for ratings. That is a lot to put on one young player, and that is why some people defend him. They say it is not his fault. They say the media is the one doing too much, and there is truth in that. Bronny did not book the interview himself. Bronny did not create the whole media machine, but at the same time, fans are still going to react to what they see. And what they saw was a player with 5 points getting treated like the biggest star of the first half. What makes it worse is that this kind of thing creates pressure on Bronny from both sides. On one side, the media builds him up in a way that does not match where he is as a player right now. On the other side, fans get annoyed and come down on him harder because they feel he is being overpushed. So the same machine that is trying to help him also creates more heat around him. That is why moments like this are bad for everybody. They are bad for the other players who deserve shine. They are bad for fans who just want honest coverage. And they are even bad for Bronny because they keep putting him in spots where people are almost forced to compare the attention he gets with the numbers he puts up. And let's really sit on that point for a second. This was a playoff game. A playoff game. That matters. This was not some random night in January where the network is trying to fill time and create a fun little story. This was supposed to be about winning, losing, pressure, matchups, and the game itself. In the playoffs, every possession means more. Every mistake gets bigger. Every player who is producing matters. So when a network uses halftime to highlight a player with 5 points just because his last name is James, it sends a clear message that the playoff stage is now being used for promotion as much as for coverage. That is what a lot of fans cannot stand. The playoffs are supposed to strip away the nonsense and focus on the real stuff. But instead, even here, the same media games are being played. Rob Parker's point was simple, and honestly, it was hard to argue with. He was saying, how does a guy with 5 points get the halftime interview while other players are having better games? That is not a wild question. That is common sense. If Rui is shooting lights out, if LeBron is leading, if another player is clearly impacting the game more, then why skip over them? Why jump straight to Bronny? The answer is obvious. Because his name is Bronny James. Because the network knows people will react. Because LeBron is attached to the story. Because that father-son angle brings emotion, attention, and debate. That is the answer, and everybody knows it, even the people pretending not to know it. Now, some people will say, who cares? It is just one interview. But that is exactly how this stuff keeps getting brushed away. It is never just one interview. It is never just one post. It is never just one highlight. It builds and builds and builds until it becomes normal. And once it becomes normal, then anybody who points it out gets called a hater. That is the trick. First, the media overdoes it. Then the audience gets used to it. Then when somebody finally says this is too much, the response is, why are you so mad? Why does it bother you? It bothers people because they can see what is happening. They can see that not everybody is being covered by the same rules. That double standard is what really drives fans crazy. If Bronny plays poorly, people are told not to be too hard on him. If Bronny has a small moment, people are told to celebrate it like history stopped in that second. If Bronny gets attention that another player would never get, people are told to just enjoy it. So where is the balance? Where is the fair ground? If he is going to be promoted like a major story, then people are going to judge him like a major story. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot tell the public he is important enough to interrupt playoff halftime coverage for, then also act shocked when people speak on him like they would speak on any other player getting that level of attention. That is why Charles Barkley's joke about not criticizing Bronny hit so hard with people. It felt true. There is this feeling that some names are protected in a way others are not. And once fans feel like media and league partners are protecting a player while also promoting him nonstop, it creates a bad mix. It makes the whole thing feel fake. It makes the whole thing feel managed. It makes fans feel like they are being pushed into caring about something in a very specific way. Sports fans do not like that. They want to decide for themselves what matters. They want a player to earn the love, not have it packaged and handed to them by a network desk. The truth is, a lot of this comes back to LeBron James. If this were not LeBron's son, none of this would be happening. The reason the interview mattered to ESPN was not just Bronny. It was Bronny connected to LeBron. It was the family story. It was the emotional story. It was the story that can be clipped, shared, and replayed all over the place. Networks love stories that can travel beyond the game. They love stories that reach casual fans, not just basketball fans. And Bronny is perfect for that because his name brings in people who may not care about a box score, but do care about the idea of father and son on the same stage. That is a business decision. It is not a basketball decision. And that is exactly why people like Rob Parker get so frustrated. Because once business becomes more important than the sport itself, the coverage starts to feel empty. You start seeing players turned into characters instead of competitors. You start seeing games turned into content instead of real contests. You start seeing real production from real players get ignored because it does not fit the planned story. That is unfair to the players who are actually doing the work. Imagine being a guy who is cooking in the first half, making the right plays, helping your team, and then watching the cameras run to Bronny because he had 5 points in the right bloodline. That has to be annoying. That has to feel disrespectful. Even if nobody says it out loud, players notice these things. And fans notice too. Fans may argue online and take sides, but deep down they understand when coverage is honest and when it is not. This did not feel honest. It felt like one more example of the NBA and its media partners trying to make Bronny into a must-watch figure before he has actually become that on the court. Maybe one day he will grow into a bigger role. Maybe one day he will become a very solid player. Maybe one day he will truly take over moments that deserve this kind of treatment. But that day is not here yet, and that is why the interview felt so off. It felt early. It felt forced. It felt like the attention was racing far ahead of the actual basketball. There is also the younger audience angle, and that is real. Bronny is young, his name is huge, and the league wants fresh faces. The league always wants the next wave. It wants new stars, new fans, new energy, and new reasons for younger people to stay connected. Bronny helps with that because he comes with built-in attention. The problem is that trying to force a star before the game proves it can backfire. Fans can smell fake hype. They can smell when they are being sold something too hard. And once they feel that, they push back. That is why the Bronny talk gets so extreme sometimes. The push is so strong that the reaction becomes just as strong. This is why I think Rob Parker was not just angry, he was tired. He sounded like somebody who has watched this kind of thing build for a while and finally snapped at one more example. Because once you have seen story after story bend around one family, one player, one name, your patience gets shorter. You stop seeing each moment by itself. You start seeing the pattern. And the pattern here is clear. Bronny gets more attention than his play level should normally get because he is tied to the biggest active name in the sport. That does not mean he cannot play at all. That does not mean he should never be talked about. It just means the media scale is completely off. At the same time, there will always be people who love it. There will always be fans who say history is history and a father-son playoff moment deserves all the shine it gets. There will always be fans who enjoy the emotion of it who do not care whether he had 5 points or 15, and that is their right. Sports is emotional. People connect to different things. Some care most about the box score. Some care most about the story. But the problem starts when the story becomes bigger than the game in a way that feels unfair. That is when people stop seeing it as celebration and start seeing it as favoritism. And favoritism is the one thing sports fans hate more than almost anything else. They can handle losing. They can handle hot takes. They can handle overreaction. But they hate feeling like one player gets a completely different set of rules. That is what this Bronny halftime interview looked like. Different rules, different standards, different treatment. It looked like a player was being promoted not because he owned the moment, but because the moment could be used to push a larger family brand. And once it feels like that, people stop focusing on the nice side of the story and start focusing on the unfair side of it. The wild thing is that the network probably knew this would happen. They probably knew some people would love it and some people would hate it. But that may be the point now. Reaction is value. Debate is value. Anger is value. If people are arguing all morning about whether Bronny should have been interviewed, then the clip worked. The moment worked. The machine got what it wanted. That is the world sports media lives in now. It is not just about telling people what happened. It is about creating a talking point that lives after the game ends. And this one clearly did that. Rob Parker going off only made it even bigger. But just because something gets attention does not mean it was the right call. That is the key point. A move can work for clicks and still be bad for basketball coverage. A moment can trend and still be silly. A clip can go viral and still deserve criticism. And that is where I stand on this. Rob Parker had every right to question it. Fans had every right to question it. Because at the end of the day, 5 points in a playoff half should not turn into a star treatment halftime interview unless the game itself truly calls for it. And this game did not call for it. The name did. So when people ask why Rob Parker went berserk, the answer is simple. He was reacting to the same thing a lot of basketball fans are seeing more and more. He was reacting to hype beating hoops. He was reacting to name value beating actual production. He was reacting to a media world where the story is too often decided before the game tells us what it should be. And in this case, that story was Bronny James, even though the basketball did not really support it. In the end, if the NBA and ESPN want to push Bronny as a major figure, then they have to accept the criticism that comes with that choice. They cannot promote him like a star and then ask people to treat him like a regular young player whenever the reaction turns negative. It does not work like that. Attention brings pressure, hype brings judgment, promotion brings expectations. That is the deal. And right now, the attention around Bronny is moving much faster than his actual game. That is why moments like this blow up the way they do. Rob Parker may have sounded harsh, but the basic point was strong. If a player with 5 points is getting the halftime interview in a playoff game while better performers are standing right there, then the coverage is not really about basketball anymore. It is about selling a story. And whether people like hearing that or not, that is exactly why this moment hit such a nerve.